Mr. Belcher here again with another screencast. Today what we're going to be talking about is the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution, two of the most important founding documents in our history. The learning outcomes for today, there are 4 of them. Number 1, what were the reasons that the Articles of Confederation failed? Number 2, why were anti-federalists against the adoption of the Constitution? Number 3, what are the different components of federalism? And number 4, how is power divided between the states and the federal government under our new Constitution? So the Articles of Confederation itself, it is our very, very first attempt at a constitution. It is an epic failure. From 1781 through 1789, it was written by the Continental Congress, and it was ultimately simply a lesson in self-government. We thought it would work, but it really didn't, and it didn't work for a few reasons. One of them, there was a heavy emphasis put on decentralized power. There was no central government or executive branch at this point. Each state had 1 vote and 1 veto, so you can kind of think about that and how problematic that it's going to be. And it's going to be dividing its power amongst the states and giving more power to those states than the actual government itself. And take a look at this quote here by George Mason from 1787. Fearing abuse of power. From the nature of man, we may be sure that those who have power in their hands will always, when they can, increase it. So think about even this could be connected to today as well. Now, the shortcomings of the Articles of Confederation, like I said, no executive branch. Each state functions completely independently, and there's no national court system, so it's going to be really hard to interpret laws or enforce laws. The government itself is going to be weak. There's no taxation power, and Shays' Rebellion is going to be an example of exactly why the Articles of Confederation are not going to work. At this point, the federal government can only request taxes being paid. They couldn't force the payment of taxes from the states. And Shay and the rest of his farmer buddies really didn't want to pay taxes, and this is what they're going to rebel. So ultimately, the realization is that the Articles of Confederation are simply too weak of a document. So what do they need to do? Do they need to revise the Articles of Confederation, or do they need to completely rewrite it and start over with, just scrap the Articles altogether? And that's what we do. The delegates meet at the Constitutional Convention, and it's really a secret meeting. We don't let a lot of other people in the states know about it. James Madison is going to take notes. Washington himself is going to be made president of the convention. Some issues here. There's going to be 2 main plans that are going to be introduced and going to be voted on. The Virginia plan and New Jersey plan, which we'll talk about in a second. And then what are we going to do about the slave issue? That's going to be a sticking point here for these colonists. So the conflicts itself. What are we going to have? Are we going to have a strong central government or a strong state government? This is where the people are really going to be concerned. Because under the Articles of Confederation, the states are strong and the power is much more in the people's hands. And with this new constitution, the idea is that government is going to be a lot stronger. And now the other question is large states versus small states. What about representation? Is it going to be based on population or 1 vote per state? Okay. And again, North versus South. Slaves, are we going to count all of them or none of them, or what are we going to do with them specifically? And then what are we going to do about a Bill of Rights? We're a lot of the things from the English Bill of Rights and include them into ours, but at the very beginning, there's no talk about a Bill of Rights. So the solutions. Let's talk about the Virginia plan first. It is a bicameral legislature, meaning that it's a 2-house government based on state population. There's also the New Jersey plan, which calls for an equal vote in a single house. So what are we going to do here? Which one do you think is going to be the best approach? We already know that we have a mixture of both. The Great Compromise is going to be a 2-house Congress that's going to satisfy not just the large states, but the small states as well. In the Senate, there's going to be equal representation. Each state is going to have 2 senators. And in the House, the representation is going to be based on the total population of that state. So the larger the state population is, the more representatives it's going to have. And the slave problem, they're going to decide on a 3/5 compromise, meaning that 3/5 of the total slave population in the southern states would be counted in their population for the House of Representatives. So mapping the Constitution itself, what is it? The Preamble is reasons why we did it. There are 7 total articles, or if you want to call them sections. The Bill of Rights is going to be added much later, and it's really going to be the hinging point of ratification. That's the first 10 amendments. The rest of the amendments, 11 through 27, have been added since 1791. And here's the preamble itself. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And the 6 basic constitutional principles. First thing, popular sovereignty. Government is going to get the authority from the people, and it's going to create a limited government. This is going to be of vital importance. Second thing, separation of powers. These duties are going to be divided amongst 3 branches of government: the legislature, the executive, and the judicial branch. And there's going to be a system of checks and balances that's going to get set up. So each branch has the ability to check and balance the other one. So Congress can check the president and vice versa. Judicial review is going to be established with Marbury-Madison decision, and this is going to let the Supreme Court determine if laws are constitutional or not. Next thing is federalism. It's going to be the division of powers amongst the state and the federal government and maintain order and really to hold the country together and keep everyone united. And the last thing is individual freedoms. This is the fundamental freedoms that cannot be taken away by our government. So federalism itself, like we just talked about, it limits government authority over the 3 branches. The legislative branch is going to make the laws. That's the Congress. The executive branch is going to be there to enforce the laws or sign them into law. That's our president. And the judicial branch is going to interpret those laws. So the Supreme Court is going to determine if laws are constitutional or not. And if they aren't, they're going to throw them out. And they're going to set up a system like we just talked about of checks and balances. And we're going to see a chart here in just a second. So as you can see here, the executive branch is going to be approving those laws, president, vice president, and the cabinet. And the judicial branch is going to review those laws. We have not just the Supreme Court itself, but we have district court and the appeals court and the Supreme Court. And then over on the left-hand side, we're going to have our legislature, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate. 435 total members in the House, 100 members in the Senate. And here's a chart of the checks and balances. Let's look at the legislative branch down the bottom and the executive branch on the right-hand side. So one of the checks that each of them have over each other is if the legislative branch passes a law, the president can veto that law if he does not believe that is a good law to have on the books. At the same time, the legislative branch can override that presidential veto with a 2/3 vote. And here are the powers between the federal government and state government. So pause the video right now, set up a Venn diagram, and put each of these things into either a federal power, a state power, or a shared power. So again, pause the video, take a moment, write these things in there, and we'll come back in a second. All right, so your Venn diagram should look like this: national powers, shared powers, state powers. Now, it doesn't matter which side that you have national or state powers on. So maintain military, declare war, establish the postal system, set standards for weights and measures, and protect copyright laws. So pause the video again so you can finish writing these all down or make any corrections that you need to, and then, again, we'll be back in a second. Now, the 10th Amendment, playing right on with those powers we just talked about. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So what this is saying if it's not specifically written in the Constitution, it's left up to the states. So you can see the sharing of powers here. Now, not everybody was in favor of this new Constitution. A group called the Anti-Federalists are those who fought against it. They distrusted the strong form of government because we just broke away from a strong form of government in the king not too long ago. They believed that the Constitution was flawed, and it really was an undemocratic process, and it wasn't giving enough power to the states. They are a firm believer that the states should have all of the power. And what they're really doing, they believe in the Constitution, is that it is giving too much power to the president and to Congress. And really what they're looking for is the missing part of a Bill of Rights. So how can we ensure the rights of the people if there is no Bill of Rights? On the federal side, we have Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. On the Democratic Republican side, or anti-federalist side, the most famous of those is Thomas Jefferson. Here's another graphic for you guys. Federalists are going to favor ratification of the Constitution, powerful government, and the Bill of Rights was not needed. And they're going to write the Federalist Papers, which we'll talk about in just a second. The Anti-Federalists are opposing the ratification and wanted the federal government to not have as much power. And with ratification of the Constitution, it's really the Federalists itself are going to make concessions to the Anti-Federalists. With the ratification succeeding, the new government is going to be formed in 1789. So the Federalist Papers itself, what were they? They're written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. They're a list of essays. And the purpose was to convince the people that the ratification of the Constitution was necessary. They knew that it was somewhat flawed, but it was better than what the Articles of Confederation had to begin with. And it's going to explain the powers that were proposed by the government and why they're necessary. And it was going to bring stability and economic prosperity, as well as freedom being reoccurring themes here. So the Bill of Rights itself, it was added to win support of those anti-federalists like we just talked about, and it specifically limits the power of the federal government in its relationship to the people, and it's going to add protections or guarantees of rights of people. And ratification. We needed 9 of 13 states to ratify the Constitution before it could go or be effective into law. Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut all ratified immediately. North Carolina and Rhode Island rejected until the Bill of Rights was added in 1789. And George Washington being elected president February 4th, 1789, being the first president under the Constitution, not necessarily our first president. So what I want you to do is take a look at this graphic organizer here, creation of the 2 political parties, the Alien and Sedition Act and Nullification, and Marbury-Madison. Either you can draw this chart or you can just simply list them out, explain what happened and how is it a conflict over checks and balances. And there's a YouTube link which we'll post in the description of the Alien and Sedition Act. So check that out if you like. It's a pretty short little clip there. So let's recap this whole thing. 4 things again. What are the reasons the Articles of Confederation failed? Why were the Anti-Federalists against the adoption of the Constitution? And what are the different components of federalism? Again, we have the checks and balances and the division of power. And number 4, how was power divided between the states and the federal government under the new Constitution? Again, check back with your Venn diagram for review on that. So if you have any questions, send me an email, let me know in class, and that's all I got for today. See you next time.